Hello and welcome to Sex, Psychics and Psychedelics, Discovering Inner Liberation. My name is Banana Jane Garnett. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a lover of freedom, and a relentless explorer of the mind. Please come join me on my journey in hot pursuit of inner illumination and liberation. For more about me, you can find me at The Banana Jane on Instagram. Now let's dive in. My guests today are Dr. Angela Taylor and Brian Mattson, MFT, a couple I like to call the Psychedelic Lovebirds. These guys are a true medicine couple, as well as being my wonderful neighbors in Ojai. They're both therapists and healers who use psychedelics to sustain and stoke their love in ways I find inspiring. Professionally, Dr. Angela Taylor is a licensed psychotherapist and an EMDR practitioner, specializing in trauma and soul retrieval. Brian Mattson is a marriage and family therapist with advanced trainings in somatic experiencing, pact couple therapy, and DARE attachment repatterning and analytic psychology. Both work with psychedelics on a personal level, as well as offering psychedelic integration services to their clients. Welcome, Brian and Angela. I'm so happy to have you here on the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Exciting to be here. Fun to be here.
Yeah, all of the things. So I met you guys a year ago when we were all new to Ojai, and two things I remember from that date. One is you brought an amazing cocktail with you with homegrown citrus. What was in that cocktail? It was so good.
Thank you for bringing that back to memory.
Yeah.
Yes. There was, local vodka made by a women-owned
local
and grown,
organic vodka.
Local organic vodka from a woman-owned business, local organic citrus liqueur, and very local, about 10 feet away, organic citrus.
Yeah, I mean,
thank you for remembering and asking.
This was the first point of envy, okay? So first there was this like next level cocktail, and then I had to witness this next level relationship. You know, there was a lot of sharing and caring, and I was like, damn, I need to learn from these guys. And you know, since then, it's been such a pleasure, and we've, you know, it's been so lovely getting to know you and witnessing this lovely relationship and all the rituals. I don't witness all the rituals, but I hear about some of them from you guys. So let's orient. You've been together for how long, and how long have you been using psychedelics together?
Gosh, how long is a little challenging because COVID kind of blends everything. I would say we met 5 years ago. Would you say about 5 years ago? And pretty close to after the meeting, it was pretty clear to me. I was like, oh, I could have a future with this woman. I could love this woman, and I don't want to pretend that I'm anything else. But we probably we got together actually the week of the COVID shutdown. Right. Was when we officially started, like, I guess as you say, like exploring something deeper that we were both available to. So.
I'm smiling because I forgot about all these specifics, but it was the Tuesday before the shutdown was the moment where we, not verbally, but very energetically, and I started to make changes in my life, contracted to experience each other as partners. And then actually that Thursday I went into the woods in Ojai. I didn't live here yet, to just be with what was changing. And when I came out of the woods on Sunday and stepped into the market, I couldn't buy toilet paper because
COVID had happened.
The pandemic had begun. And that's exactly when we started.
Yeah. So. And I would say too, that really looking back on it, that in some ways altered states or a non-traditional way of meeting has been present, because we met dancing in something called ecstatic dance. So we probably danced together for several hours before we ever exchanged words or knew anything about each other. So there was an energetic experience there. And then something else that was always influencing our relationship, at least from my point of view, but I think yours too, is when we would anytime we would have a significant meeting, I would have a dream. Mm. And I had a series of dreams that would even when we finally got together, she just kind of reached out and said, oh, hi, I'm just reaching out to people that I really care about. And we'll say, and then I was like, well, I don't know. is that a yes? Is that not a yes? And then I had a dream, and I told her about the dream. And then once the dream entered, from that point on, the conversation started. And then even a year before we ever got together, I was doing a personal journey, and
a psychedelic journey.
A psychedelic journey, right? Psychedelic journey. And I received a message about Angela and me and our relationship. And I shared that with her. Like I said, that was a year before we ever got together.
What was the message? You've got to be
specific.
Yeah. What was the message?
Yeah. In the middle of the journey, there was a message that I got was, there's a part of Angela that can come home in you. And I think it was on the journey itself, when I was still on the mushrooms. I think I sent you that message.
Yep, you did.
And then we had an exchange about that. And then something else occurred to me too. I went to Guatemala in December prior to COVID, and also prior to when Angela and I got together. And while there, I did a day-long San Pedro journey. And San Pedro is like, it's also a hallucinogen. And I was in this beautiful place. I was laying on the back of this tree, and, just experiencing. And San Pedro has this beautiful capacity to open your heart. It's called the grandfather, because it teaches you how to live during the day with an open heart. So I'm there in this expanded state, just having a beautiful time. And all of a sudden, ding. And sure enough, it's Angela. The only text message I get that day is from Angela. And I think you said, "Hey friend, I'm thinking about you." And I'm like, "Yeah, of course you are." So anyway, so it's like, there's been that from dancing to dreams. And I think the important thing here is the connection in our invitation. It's not just through psychedelics. Psychedelics is one of the means of exploring a deeper connection. I think one of the foundational principles that she said to me early for her practice, her life, and now for our relating is love is always in the listening. So all of these things are just opportunities for us to listen. We listen first deeply, and then from that place of listening to the truth, then we share with each other. And in the sharing with each other, it builds the intimacy. And which, for me anyway, I think exploring intimacy and deepening intimacy is the reason we're here in these bodies on this planet. And psychedelics has probably been the most powerful tool ritual. There's a number of things, but psychedelics has been one of the things, because it gives us an expanded experience of ourselves that we can then share with the world and our beloveds, our partners.
Thank you for that. I know that ritual is a very important part for you guys of your, when you take psychedelics together, you like to set up rituals. In fact, we were talking about one, I think yesterday, where you were talking about how you resolve conflicts together. Could you talk us through that, how you set up the space and how you handle a piece of conflict resolution with a dose or a microdose?
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I think it bears repeating, just because it's so important, at least for us and in our experience, that it's almost like our experience and our connection was already so energetic that the ritual in psychedelics and it, like you said, other practices, dance and listening and meditation, just gives all of that a place to really come together and make sense. And in fact, Brian asked me this morning, he's like, "What if she asks you, what's the biggest thing psychedelics has done for you?" And I was like, "How do you answer that?" And I realized in sitting with that offering was it's a container that's big enough for what was already happening inside of me. And so the way that it gives you access to spirit, information, plays with time, brings spirit close in a way that the human can grab hold of. It was like, oh, that's the truth for me. It was like I was already having this big experience of life, but it didn't make sense in a linear 3-dimensional world. And so the psychedelic, along with ritual, just created a big enough container for everything to make sense. And so that, I think, is with conflict, right? Conflict and conflict resolution, like the conflict gets too big and whatever container we have isn't big enough. And so we found in particular that psychedelics in conjunction with ritual is the sweet spot for that. So usually it's born in imagination first, which is something that we talk about too, is that the experience, which we call the journey, because psychedelics aren't just about the moment of ingestion. It's about the entire experience and what's happening for you, and how, in my perspective, is these are living sentient beings, creatures, and chemicals. And so we are in relationship with them. And the relationship begins when we like hear the call, just like a conversation would, with a human being. So, so the journey, that's why we call it a journey, because it's a whole experience, and you're different at the end than you were at the beginning. So for us, it feels like, I think this is true, that the ritual and the journey begins just with the idea. It's like there's this implanting, there's this sense of like, oh, something's brewing here that is bigger than just the 3-dimensional conflict resolution style.
Yeah,
does that feel true?
No, I think that is true. And in particular, the thing that you're speaking to, Jane, was we had reached a place that had a little bit of a communication impasse. And it was that we needed to communicate, in fact, about the fact that we were struggling to communicate. And so what happened is that then, there was an invitation. I think this is important. On that day, there was an invitation to, can we have this conversation, and should we use psychedelics, in this case, mushrooms? And so both of us checked into that listening place, and the answer was yes. And so the ritual that happened afterwards is that we woke up, and then we prepared the space, cleaned the space, put a fire in the fireplace.
Your house, inside your house?
Inside the house.
Yeah.
And so the cleaning of that is like what Angela was saying, is the ritual is a container to hold the energy and keep it directed. And so as we go through the ritual, it's like, symbols are things that hold meaning deeper than what they are literally. And so as we were cleaning, it was also bringing us into focus. And it was bringing our mind, our emotions, our bodies into this place where we had set intentionality. And so the environment then supported it, because the environment was clean. It smelled good. It was clean. Like that was part of what the ritual was. And then we invited something that's so vital, which is the third. So when you meditate or when you come into relationship, you're inviting the third, which is the thing that's created between the two of you. And so when you invite
wait. Let me just slow down with that. So the third is, it's not Brian, it's not Angela. Is it the relationship? Is the relationship the third, or is spirit the third?
It's all of it. It's the relationship to all of it, because, at least this is my take, and I think Angela's too, is that we're here to develop intimacy. And the intimacy is a relationship to all things. So my relationship to Angela deepens because we both listen to spirit, universe, the trees, the whatever it is, right? And so the third encompasses all of that. And if we're listening and we're good shepherds of the third, then we both become more, better, and deeper because of it, right? So it's like, if we're both in consent and we've defined what the third is, it gets first priority. And because we've consented to it, it makes us more of what we are. Does that
right?
make sense?
So I think so. So the relationship is seen as something that is greater than you, and that is sort of like a spiritual entity. It has a spiritual existence, and it has the ability to connect you more broadly, more expansively to the world,
to all of
the cosmos,
yeah.
To the whole of experience. Yes, I see what you mean. So yes, so there's this constant sort of return to the idea of something higher and greater that you access together, but it's not just about Brian, and it's not just about Angela. Is that right?
That's right. And if we're doing it right, not only is it higher and greater and more mystical, but it's more gritty, it's more dirty, it's more messy, right? It's like, because expansion never happens in just one direction, right? It happens in every direction. So and also there's another message that I got when maybe we did a first journey together, which was, I got this message that said, get in and buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride. And we were both like, whatever, right? Because we're still in the beginning bliss, but it's really kicked our ass. Mm-hmm. Like, our relationship has taken us to the edge of who we think we are individually and in relationship, and then beyond, because it's been so difficult. right? But the degree that we can go into the muck is the opportunity.
It's been so
where
difficult.
we can reach.
It's so difficult to sustain the relationship, so difficult to get along. Like what?
What do you? I mean, I could keep talking, which is
we don't get too much muck, but you know.
Well, but there is a lot of muck, and as we're talking, part of me is grinning and just enjoying that. It's so the word that keeps coming to mind for me is just we. Like it's a way to enter the we. And I think a lot of times our individual psychological suffering it's a forgetting of the we, you know, and that might manifest on the individual plane as like, oh, I feel lonely, or I don't belong, or I'm in heartbreak because I broke up with my person, or this is painful because this thing I want I can't have. And to me, those are all different ways of just forgetting that we're all part of the we, and we find the we through, this is one way, through relationship, and particularly through conscious relationship, or particularly through conscious relationship with the support of psychedelics. But another way to say it is like, I think that's what people look for when they go to church. I think that's what people look for when they go to football games. You know, that moment of we, where everybody is somehow in it together.
Yeah.
For those who practice yoga, I think we're talking about yoga. We're talking about union, to yoke. What is it we're yoking? You know, in the grandest sense, we're yoking everything. So we're yoking the above with the below. We're yoking the outer with the inner. And so,
that everything is really important.
It's the everything. It's the shadow and the light. It's the trauma. It's the past. It's all is welcome. I mean, that's something that, man, we talk about when we're helping people integrate or process to go on their own psychedelic experiences in a safe way, is really the practice of how much can you welcome? Because the more we can say all is welcome, all is welcome, all is welcome, what are you here to teach me? The more expansive, as opposed to like terrifying.
Yeah. And I think that
the experiences.
I mean, it feels like, sorry, can I just say something? It feels like what we're talking about is, I mean, it's sort of back to this idea of love is in the listening. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to listen when you're locked into your own individual sense of exactly what it is you need right now. And I think this is where couples get stuck and people get stuck is, you know, when needs appear, and often they're sort of unmet needs from childhood, they feel very urgent. You know, I just need you to do this for me, or you didn't do this for me. And it feels like the only thing that's going to make you feel better in that moment, I think this is the ego's perspective, is to have your wish granted, is to be sated, is to eat that food you need to eat, to be given that, whatever it is, from your partner, and then everything will be okay, which is sort of definitely rather childlike state. And I suppose, you know, it takes some work and some, what's the word I'm thinking of? Coaxing, like maybe the ritual is a thing that sort of coaxes you into a broader, more kind of grown up and expansive state of mind where you're like, there's more to heaven than earth than my apparently very urgent need right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that resonate?
I love that, actually. And I love that you spoke to the word ritual. And what landed for me as you said that was also that the ritual is our way of being as responsible as we can and consenting to what you just said. Right? Like if I'm in my individual ego, my belief has to be oriented from the place of my hunger is the most important thing. It's the most real thing, and getting it satiated is the best thing. And then we have these moments of awakening where we go, okay, my little self still believes that, but I also trust there's something greater. And so conscious coupling with psychedelics, I think, is a way to open to that, whatever the greater is. Okay, what happens if we are with the hunger instead of expecting it to be satiated? And then the ritual, the preparation is, it just landed as you said that, is it's a 3-dimensional way of being as responsible as possible. Okay, Sausha is a yogic philosophy, which is cleanliness, and it's a way that you prepare yourself for yoga, is you clean. You know, so there's a way, okay, I'm going to be responsible for this greater thing. I'm going to invite her, him, it, as best as we can. So we're going to clean. That's our responsibility. And it's also a little bit of a contract. It's a consent. It's a yes, this thing is happening. We don't know exactly what it is. And we're consenting to greater, higher, gooder for the purpose of love and healing. So, okay. And we're doing it the best way we know how, which is to move our bodies around the 3-dimensional plane and burn sage. you know, and say our prayers and ring our bells and call in the directions and go, okay.
Yeah. And I think, and I think, and once that's done, it takes an attitude of comfort being with the unknown, because it's like if somebody were going to take a psychedelic journey or do any kind of practice that's going to get them in touch with the numinous or whatever may take them beyond, this is my feeling around it, is the degree they can go is the degree they're comfortable with being with discomfort. But if your goal is to avoid or numb discomfort, we have to find a new goal if we're really going to do intimate work, because the discomfort is often the path. It guides us to where we can experience a limitation that we need to go beyond. So when we do the ritual, we're inviting something, saying yes, doing our best. There's also this place where we've agreed to welcome the unknown, which can be scary, terrifying, illuminating, blissful, all the different things. But it's like that place. If we're full of ourselves, we can't be full of God or the universe or whatever it is. And so it's that invitation. I'm willing to be scared. I'm willing to be uncomfortable. I'm willing, because whatever I'm committed to, I think is more than that.
As you're talking, I'm thinking, well, first of all, sort of how, in terms of these dimensions, evolved you are compared to the average person. So many people don't even want to do couples therapy or have a deep conversation with their partner, right? So we're talking about kind of sort of extremes of exploration. And I think that some of these modalities, whether it's couples therapy or going on a psychedelic journey, can feel very threatening for people who haven't done it, because you kind of know there's going to be that discomfort. There's going to be a reckoning. That you're kind of most likely going to see under the hood of your, conscious everyday frontal cortex experience and get into something maybe a bit more gnarly. And I think that, because I've been there. I never wanted to go on this path, but hey, it happened. But what I discovered along the way is the benefit of being humbled, the benefit of having your ego taken out of the driver's seat. There's an icky feeling, and when you're confronted with your shadows and you're like, oh yeah, I was like an asshole to that person, or I wasn't conscious, or I wasn't kind, or I was a bad mom, or, endless things that you get kind of confronted with, right? Mm-hmm. But then, on the other side of that, there's more love, there's more acceptance, there's less taking yourself seriously. So I think that the rewards that you find when you've gone through the tunnel of discomfort are immense.
Rewarding. But the thing is, I imagine, though, Jane, you had something there that started the journey, that you had a desire and you had curiosity. Because if they're going to come to couples therapy, take a psychedelic journey, do anything, it's like the requirements, at least from my perspective, is they have to have a desire to know or grow, and they have to have curiosity, because curiosity will keep the nervous system open when something scary happens, when it could contract if there isn't curiosity. So my question to you would be, did you have desire and curiosity? And if so, I bet they carried you to the next step.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good observation. And I've always had an enormous amount of curiosity. And I've also been averse to pain and discomforts, but my curiosity has been stronger than my aversion. So that's been the leader.
And that's what it takes, right? Like that's the thing.
Well, and this is where I can geek out on mythology and things, at which that's the herald. It's that point in the fairy tale where the frog, kind of beckons you into the forest or into the deeper waters. And one of the things that we've lost sight of in our modern Western kind of shared imagery is we've lost some of those gods, goddesses, and fairy tales that hold what we're talking about, which is that beautiful paradoxical complexity of life. And so that's where I get excited, because it's like, in our modern world, we want the invitation in the herald to be the shiny thing, and then we want it to get exponentially shinier and better from there. And then that's confirmation that we've made the right choice. And these kinds of journeys that we're talking about, these depth, curious, I'm afraid of it, but I'm going anyway, that's the hero's journey. That's where the herald is the snake or the frog or the fault or the blunder or the icky or the part of your body that you hate or the trauma. By the way, trauma can be a beckoning. It's horrible. It can be devastating and horrific. And it can also be one of those dark, disgusting characters that invites you into a deeper way of being. So I get so excited because that's the frog, right? And in those fairy tales, when we really slow down, it's like we know, it's not in avoiding the frog. It's not in conquering the frog. It's not in slaying the frog. It's not in running away from the frog. It's in kissing the frog, right? So there's that fear. There's that disgusting. There's that accident. There's that awful thing. And man, if we can bring it close and welcome and be with it, then the next unimaginable thing, magical thing.
Because her dissertation was titled "The Necessity of Madness." And the necessity of madness is the offering, right? The madness is the offering to consciousness and expansion and intimacy. At least, that's my interpretation. But the madness can take any form, right? Fear, eating disorder, whatever it might be.
Violence, chaos.
Yeah. But our mantras, when we would help people, is, the mantra is welcome. What have you brought to teach me? And it can happen. Like I'm primarily a couples therapist. If a couple comes in and they're starting, Angela and I are talking about probably encountering, we've done tremendous years of work and personal work and therapy and various things. But even if a couple that's just starting out and never spoken about their inner life or their interpersonal life together, if they come in and sit down on our couch and just say, I'm really afraid to be here. The journey to everything just started. Because they put voice to an inner state of fear, and then we get to meet that fear with everything, starting with how do we make it feel safe, and then. So it's, I guess what I'm cautious of, if somebody's listening to this and they're afraid, oh my gosh, I can't, these guys are talking about things and ways of relating that are so far. It's like when I was learning to surf, my coach said, bigger waves, same principle. Right? So if you're just starting, the same principle, it's like, I'm curious to be with my fear and I invite it because I believe, based on people that I trust who've been there before, I believe there might just be something better for me if I look at this.
I like that.
That's
So on the other side of the fear.
And when I started surfing, my coach, I couldn't get out past the waves. So you're talking about bigger waves. I couldn't even get out. I couldn't leave the shore. And I said, do you have a tip? Like, what's the special tip? How do I do this? And this little 20-year-old, unbeknownst to himself, guru just looked at me and he's like, well, yeah, you just keep paddling.
Yeah. So,
similarly, right? You just keep paddling wherever you are. You just keep paddling and you keep going for it.
So many good metaphors. I really like this idea of the shadow, or the frog in the relationship being an invitation. So if a fight is a frog, or a stagnation in a relationship, or any kind of relationship problem is a frog, then we know on the other side of this frog, there is the potential for transformation. And then in laying out the ritual for the conversation about the frog, we're inviting in the possibility, the prospect even of transformation. So I want to go back to this. We're in your living room. We've cleared the space, which is a beautiful sort of metaphor for we care about this. We care about each other. We care about our space. We care about this structure that we're building. We clear the space. You say some prayers. I think I'm sure they could be any prayers, right? Any kind of reach out to the greater good. And then I suppose you sit down and talk. Tell me about, and you take some mushrooms. Let's not forget this, right? So talk me through that bit.
Well,
go ahead.
As I think, the setting the space and then taking, it's like a microdose of mushrooms, right? So it's like subperceptible, but it still works on the nervous system and the brain. And then once we sit down, I think there's a thing of knowing the topic, having agreed to meet there, and then also knowing your partner. And in our relationship, one of the things that works, that I find works best is, and I'll just say on this day, what I said was, here we are, and it's my understanding that this is why we're here, and this is what we seek to do. And then that kind of sets the groundwork, the frame. It also checks in, because I think one of the things I've learned about Angela is the invitation for her, not only her internal invitation, but really a real clear invitation from me is really helpful. And then she's an extremely powerful woman, like a beautiful, powerful woman. And once she feels the invitation and she gets to step into that and let that energy flow, then it is a very powerful process. But the beginning, anytime you touch power, like I worked as an electrician in college getting up, like you have to be so careful when you're approaching higher voltage. And so I think both of us have learned to be careful around that. And I think the invitation, I know my partner, I know what happens. So we set that stage, and then anyway, I'll stop talking about that. But I think that was a really powerful thing of learning.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Like even I'm sure Jane can see it happening, but even in this process, there's that. As you make an invitation, and part of the invitation is a spaciousness, a speaking intimately and specifically to the other. Even in this moment in the podcast, I can feel things moving in me more profoundly. So that was a nice little, and this is a good example too, right? Of this is there's so many invitations waiting for us at any moment. And I think something we think we say, you can tell me if you don't, but there's many ways to enter these sort of non-ordinary places where we go, my wanting is to get beyond where I am. Prayer can be one, psychedelics can be one, vulnerability can be one. And how can you be more vulnerable than in a relationship, whether it's with a friend that you actually are invested in, or, a partner? But that I love to remember and remind, like, vulnerability is always, it's immediately available. So you don't have to do all of these things and have this, vulnerability is immediately available the minute you share an inner
But
truth.
Angela, vulnerability is so damn hard, especially when you're all,
it's
when
terrifying.
you're pissed at your partner, or you feel abandoned, or, one of these core, places, and you're being struck. The last thing you want to do is be vulnerable. You just want to fucking win, or kill them or something.
Well,
I don't know.
Right.
Okay.
You don't want to be soft.
So here's a good shout out. Yeah. So a good shout out for your plant ally. And for me, it's mushrooms in particular. That is not true for everyone. And that would be a whole separate conversation, but I'll just name it. That is specific. I have many plant allies. I have yarrow, I have chamomile, I have lavender. I think rosemary is yours. So we're not just talking about the more than human, we're not just talking about psychedelics, right? There's a lot of more than human helpers we have. And so one of mine specifically is mushrooms. And so all of this was to say, they support me in entering and embodying vulnerability and remembering my truth, because I would strongly recommend against entering any work with psychedelics. If you're in the beginning, if you're in a fussy place, that is not a good way. I mean, you can work with them by imagining them. Or we were talking earlier about, you can work with the spirit of the medicine just by learning about it. Look at its chemical makeup. Be in conversation about it. Be around it, right? So
just even how it lives in the forest.
Right? Like how these things manifest has a lot to show us. So we can learn just by, you don't have to ingest, please. And, also, by the way, it's illegal in a lot of states. So it's been made really difficult for a lot of people. But one of the things that works now for me, I would not have done this in the beginning, but we entered a space together and I was fussy. I knew that vulnerability was the right choice, but my human self could not choose it. I was mad. I was agitated. But again, we've done this long enough that I knew that it was the higher choice. I knew that my highest self wanted it, but my low self couldn't choose it.
When you say it, you mean vulnerability.
So I was meaning vulnerability. Yeah. And so, I was setting up the house for ritual, but like, this is stupid. This is annoying. I know it isn't really, but my low self So it's just funny that you say, you know, vulnerability is difficult. There have been a few times, only a few, but there have been a few times where it was like, in a humble place, I had to kind of ask the mushrooms, like, please be gentle with me. I'm going to do this. I know that it's the right choice, but my human self is really struggling because I'm mad and I want to be right. And I can't let that go in this ordinary state of consciousness. And at this stage in the game, they showed up for me anyway. You know, it was like the softness moved in, the heart opened, you know, and then I even had heart opening and tenderness for the one who didn't want to be vulnerable and was kicking and screaming as she did her sacred ritual.
The part of yourself,
you know,
you
so there
could see
was
the part of yourself that didn't want to give it up, and you could have compassion for her. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so like even her, even she, you know, me 10 minutes earlier, you know, even she wasn't outside the embrace of the love, the care. Like literally all is welcome. It's not just a saying. So it's like even the one who isn't welcoming, she's welcome.
Yeah.
And that whole thing, Jane, from inviting, having the awareness that a meeting was needed, you know, for us to meet, a conscious intention, a yes, all the preparation, the ritual, the thing, you know, all of that led to, we did one thing differently than we'd done in the past. Only one. And it's like what I tell my couples that I work with, like massive improvement is 2 to 3% a week. You know, if you can make next week 2 to 3% better than this week, we're free. You know, and so we did all of that we talked about, and as much work as we've done on ourselves, there was only one single choice, one thing that we did differently that changed.
Can you share what the thing was?
That happened. I mean, I can. Are you okay with me sharing it? Like,
so by the way, so I think we made it clear, but yeah, we're talking generally, but also specifically, there was a moment of frustration, encounter, difficulty in our individual selves and in the relationship. And Brian got the message to use psychedelics in service to whatever was trying to emerge. So then that's where this whole thing started. And he asked for the help building the container, and I was sassy and fussy. And so we did the whole thing. 12 hours later.
Right. And so we're in the conversation, you know, and it's a 2.5 hour conversation, but there's a moment in the conversation where there's something that I'm trying to invite. And Angela has a response, which is, to me, felt hopeless, not engaged, whatever. And I had a reaction where I was just like I was a little crestfallen because my little self wanted something different. And in the past, and it happened a little bit then too, my reaction has a way of wiping out her enthusiasm or her willingness or her whatever. And
I go beyond fight, I go beyond flight, and like deep into existential collapse.
Yeah. And there's no way out, right? And I know at that point, I've lost her. Like we've lost the thing that was hoping to germinate. We've lost the connection to each other, and I don't know how, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then a few minutes later, I could feel she made a different choice. And all it took was all the things we did, the ritual, the microdose of the mushrooms, the things. It allowed the space for her to have enough freedom from the state she would normally drop in historically to make a different choice. What was the different choice? And then, well, I'll get there. And then when she made the different choice, then put words to it, right? And so the different choice was, I mean, you want to speak to the...
No, go ahead.
The different choice was, I think there might be, it's like desire and curiosity. I want something different and I'm curious about it. There might be something else here if I choose to stay with this conversation. If I bring something back, another point, because where she would fall in collapse, let's say, there's no conversation after that. And she brought back the conversation and said, here's what I went through and here's what happened. And you did this and I was frustrated and disappointed. So she stayed in the fight.
I got it. She reconnected with you and she spoke to her experience when she goes to that dark place. Got it. Okay. Yeah. That feels so important actually for all of couples, is to kind of to speak into that unbearable, because it's not always that unbearable to the other person. It's unbearable to us when we're experiencing it. And it's temporary.
Right.
And the problem is if we feel it and we feel it strongly and deeply, we're sure we're right. And that was one of my learnings when we hit a crisis in our relationship, you know, like before we bought this house and stuff, where I was like, I don't think I can go any farther because I felt it. I was sure I was right. And I think for us, psychedelics and good therapy has been really helpful. And the therapist said, kind of slapped me and was like, Brian, you don't even realize what you're not bringing. And I was like, it was like thunder went off, right? But this is what I'd say to people. Just because you feel it does not mean you're absolutely right. It just means your feeling is real.
This makes me laugh because it's, you know, we're all therapists and we know how much of our work is about giving permission to feelings, welcoming feelings, having the fucking feelings. Feelings are genuinely so important, and yet we are not our feelings. So we spend all this time, you know, helping people have them, but the next realization or a co-occurring realization is this is something we experience. This is part of our human experience. We want to allow it, but it is not our identity. It's not who we actually are.
And not our own.
It's not our own identity.
Yeah, not our own.
Yeah. It's our expression. It's not our identity. It's not who we existentially are.
That's a nice way to put it.
I'm not existentially angry. I experience anger.
Yeah. And I just to call in metaphors and things that are arriving again too, is it's one of the things I appreciate so much about the language of alchemy. And without having to understand the whole thing, the idea again is that just thinking of alchemical chemistry and feelings are, so for things to really transform, I mean, we have a fire behind us, which is it's an alchemical process. And the idea is that with this, it's like feelings help, their ingredients to create the fire, but they're not the thing itself. So we want them, right? We want to welcome them. They give us insight. It might be the frog, it might be the this, right? But it might be the sulfur, it might be, but they're part of the process, but we get so intoxicated by it, right? Whether it's bliss or anger or anything in between, we get intoxicated by the thing, but like, that's just the sulfur. That's supposed to aid in the fire. And then the fire does her magical thing of transformation. And then the new thing is there. But it's about honoring and welcoming in, but also having discernment to not be intoxicated by the ingredients for the magic, right? And being able to step back and
and I think there's something else important there in terms of that I'd want to distinguish between Angela and me and our relationship and what other people may need or want, which is, what is the goal? You know, like for us, when we got together, our goal was not to stay together. Our goal was to find the truth, right? And so what is the truth of our existence, our being, or whatever it is? And so this relationship may serve us for a time, a season, or whatever. So, a lifetime, yeah. Yeah, but that's not the ultimate goal. 12 lifetimes, yeah. But so the invitation.
Yeah, you're right. That's not what we're in service to, right? Like that's a playful moment, but also sincere. Like I do have a preference. I do have a stake in the game, right? And that's not what I'm in service to. I'm not a devotee of my preference, even though I still have them.
Well said, yeah.
That what we're committed to is the truth.
And some couples, they come in, they're like, look, I'm not looking. Some people come in legitimately and they're like, I just want to cope with life and cope with my relationship. And coping is different than healing. And coping is different than, this kind of expansion that I think we're particularly hungry for. And coping is absolutely fine. Some people just want to find a way. I just want to not be in pain. And I want to live a life that is safe. And that is perfectly okay. But that's not what we have agreed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. I think that's good perspective and very true. So I've been taking some notes as we've been talking on kind of almost like, bullet points on where psychedelics can help in relationships. Not that we're necessarily advocating, but it's certainly an interesting exploration. So we've got this idea of truth and truth seeking. We've got, and I want you guys to listen and see if I've left anything off the list. Vulnerability, being able to access and communicate vulnerability, the ability to connect to higher realms, to dissipate conflict through increase in compassion and decrease in fear. I don't know if we've talked about increase in vision and perspective. Oh, and then there's something actually, Brian, you were mentioning this, I think, recently about a moment where you'd been meditating and you had this insight that dropping trash on the ground was the same as dropping trash on yourself. Right. And it was such a great illustration of getting closer to the sort of the unified state, this feeling of like, we're all connected. Everything is connected.
That's right.
So is there anything I've left out there? I mean, I'm sure there are many things, but as a synopsis.
Well, I guess the part that I just want to make sure is entered is that psychedelics, it's another medium to connect to the truth. And the truth can be, before I expand out into bliss, I have to go through something that was painful, right? And so there has to be that invitation and space for that. So, I guess it's just that caveat that is so rich in the muckiness too. And we've gone through some really hard things individually and in our relationship. And so there's a way where we could just highlight in the interview, oh my God, look at, but it's like, it's a journey into self, so anyway, I think that's the part.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's a gnarly side to it. And whether you see that as a disadvantage to taking psychedelics or a very important part of it is going to be, down to your individual preference, I suppose. I'd like to just, close by asking you guys specifically for advice, counsel for couples who might want to start kind of tiptoeing into this area safely and exploring it, who maybe they can't access guides or afford guides, as many people can't, unfortunately, but maybe they want to just tiptoe in themselves. What would you recommend?
I think what I would say is just really look at what makes you curious, what makes you uncomfortable, learn about both, and then use your imagination to explore. Because so much happens in the nervous system doesn't know that what we imagine isn't real, right? So we get the experience, and experience is what's transformational. So in the imaginal of what I'm curious about and want, and what makes me uncomfortable, both are amazing places to start. And then learn. And if you're on the path and you're listening deeply to what's true for you, I fully 100% believe that the universe will meet you there, and the next will show itself through the listening, and the next step will show itself through the listening.
Love all of that. And I would, I'll say general and then specific. Big surprise in general, I would say start with listening and start with respect and activate as much awe as you can. And you can do that through, my favorite is Fantastic Fungi. I think it does a beautiful job of activating awe in these incredible beings that exist. But there's a lot out there. I mean, luckily people are talking about it again. And back to the 50s, there's beautiful research. And I'm sure beyond that, that's just as far as my knowledge goes. But learn about it. Learn where they came from. Like, activate your respect and awe. And knowledge, information, and again, imagining works, looking at the chemicals works, ingesting is down the road. And then very specifically, I would say don't do it in isolation. Again, we're talking about the energy of we, but also specifically we, be in community. Things that are terrifying on your own are less so. So talk to people, find couples, find guides, find integration support groups. Those are completely legal wherever you are. We're allowed to talk about what we've experienced. So, there's in-person, there's online integration support groups that help integrate all kinds of non-ordinary states. And specifically, honestly, I would give a shout out to I think it's called the Navigating Psychedelics Trip Journal. Is that right, team? I think so. Yeah, Navigating Psychedelics Trip Journal. It's really, it works for people who are starting pretty much at zero and wanting to work with these compounds
and
in a responsible way.
That's the title.
That's the title.
Navigating Psychedelics.
Navigating Psychedelics Trip Journal. It's by Psychedelics Today.
Yeah.
And it's really plain English, and it gives you categorically different kinds. Do you want to experience, do you want to party? Do you want spiritual? Do you want transformational? And really talks you through, talks you through how to set up this, how to be safe, how to process, gives you journal prompts. So to me, if it's a really easily accessible tool that is a great support.
Beautiful.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
all very helpful. And I'd like to wrap up. Maybe we could go one at a time. Tell me something you wish for in the future, could be for yourselves or this work. And then please tell us where we can find you.
What I wish for myself and for everybody else I work with is just really a deeper experience of heart-centered aliveness.
Heart-centered aliveness.
Yeah.
I love that.
In the grand, I wish for love. And in the very, very specific, I wish for the soon, rapid, forthcoming, immediate now decriminalizing of these substances and experiences so that we get to just be open in our support and help of each other, because I think that's how humans do best, is in love and support of each other, and certainly these experiences not excluded. Right now that feels the most true.
Amen to both of these prayers.
Right? Yes. Love and legalization.
Love and legalization, baby. Legalizing love every step of the way.
That's good. That's a good tagline.
Well, look, I love you both, and I'm so happy to have had this conversation with you today. And can you just tell us where to find you online or wherever?
We are not great at social media, although that's way far out as a wish. We're around, but best way to me is just straight through my website, AngelaTaylorLCSW.com. Those have links and such.
I'll join that team. Brian Mattson, Brian with an I, Mattson, Mattson, Brian Mattson, MFT.com. That's it. Brian Mattson, MFT.com. We're great at social media and promotion, clearly.
Just
I think I have another
find
website,
these people. What you have to do is just walk into the
Go
forest.
to the forest.
And listen.
And listen.
Oh my God, we sound like we're barely
on the planet.
anything
else, just listening. Yeah. Love is in the listening.
And we really are on the planet.
We are.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, loves. And
love you, James.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, and thank you for doing this and inviting us into this space and doing what you do thank you for doing what you do for all, and then specifically for us. It's a blessing.
Yeah, we love chatting with you, friend.
I love it. Come back. Bye, babies.
Bye, Banana.
Bye-bye. Bye.